James, it's great to be here at the console of the organ. So just give us a little bit of an overview of what we're looking at here with all the keyboards and the pedals and the stops. Just explain to us briefly what's in front of us.
The organ is a keyboard instrument fundamentally, and we've got here several keyboards, as you've said, and each one essentially controls a different set of sounds. All these what are called stops on the sides, each are a different sound, and they are grouped according to the divisions. So for instance, this bottom manual here is the grand orgue, or the great as we would say in English, and then we have the positif, the réci, and then the pedal over there. And we can combine the combinations together, we can couple manuals together to get the full effect of all three speaking together, or we can have them separately as well. So that's essentially what the organ framework is.
Excellent. And so what makes this organ so special is that a lot of it is made up of pipe work and stops by the great organ builder Cavaillé-Coll, who was working around the 19th century, is that right? And we're going to hear a little bit about the extraordinary sounds on this instrument and some of the pipe work that still survives from Cavaillé-Coll. So shall we hear a little bit played?
Yeah.
So the first thing we're going to hear is some of the swell, what are called the string stops, and then on a French organ, that swell division is called the réci. So let's hear a little bit of those gentle swell string sounds. Great, so then why don't we hear a little bit of the loud and the stronger sounds on the swell and what the pedal box will do for that.
Sure, so this is, we have a full complement of reeds here in the swell, and as you say, there's the box which has shutters on the front which are controlled by these pedals here. And when the box is shut and you've got all the full sounds on the réci speaking, it has been described a lot, the full swell effect as like a wasp's nest.
Right.
So here it is with the box open to start, and then I'll close it and you'll see hopefully what I mean.
Marvellous. So one of the things I understand that makes a Cavaillé-Coll and typical French organ so unique are what are called the foundation stops. So tell us a little bit about the foundation stops, and then perhaps we'll hear them on this organ.
Sure, yes, so we have, if we start on the great, which is where the beefiest 8-foot foundations are to be found. 8 foot, of course, is the pitch of pipe that corresponds to the same as piano pitch. We have, on this organ, we have 5 8-foot foundations on the great, and what makes them so special is the character. They're all very different from one another, and yet the way they're voiced means that they can combine and the sound gets added to create an extremely broad and warm colour. So we've got, for instance, just a flute on its own, a solitional, which is quite a thin string stop, then a big harmonic flute, a very fat flute, and then a couple of principals, the most fundamental organ tone. And when we add them all together, it gives you a very, very broad sound. And if we then add all the 8 foots in from the rest of the organ as well, the effect is magnified.
Yeah, wonderfully rich sound, isn't it? So on top of that foundation or bedrock sound that we've just heard, there are stops that are intended to be heard very much just on their own, aren't there? Literally sort of solo stops. So can we hear a couple of those?
Yeah, and a lot of the orchestral sounds of the organ that we know today, Cavaillé-Coll developed and improved, including this stop, which in fact is original Cavaillé-Coll pipework up on the Récit, which is called a basson au bois, and it's a stop he developed. He invented this, where in the top half of the keyboard, the voicing is that of an oboe sound, and as you go further down the keyboard, it becomes a little bit more mellow, a bit more bassoon-like.
Right.
So if I play. Quite mellow in tone, but as we go up, you can hear it just becomes a little bit keener, and so that was Cavaillé-Coll's own invention over there. We also have a typical Cromorne stop here on the positive, which is, I suppose our English equivalent would be the clarinet, but it's a little bit keener than that. And we also have some other combinations. We have here what are called mutations on the positive. Now this is where the length of the pipe is a fraction, and what it does is if I play a middle or a C below middle C here on piano pitch, 8 foot, and then pull out the 2 2/3, it gives me a fifth, an octave higher, and then there's a third, another fifth. And this creates an extraordinary colour down low, but as I go higher, the individual pitches start to blend into one and actually create another beautiful solo sound. And then finally, the stop we absolutely mustn't avoid using in this demonstration is the voix humaine, the vox humana, voice of the human. So if there are any singers watching, I hope they won't be offended by this. But this is a very characteristic stop of the French organ, and when used with the tremulant, which is a device that distorts the wind supply, thus giving a vibrato effect, this is the sound of it. I think if any singers found themselves singing like that, then I think they need to go and see a doctor.
So obviously there's a Technicolor limitless combination of sounds that's available on the manuals for the hands to play. So let's just turn our attention now to the feet, which really set the organ apart from any other keyboard instrument. So underneath what's going on with the hands and all the stops that we've heard on the manuals, let's hear a few of the pedal stops, and perhaps you can show us some of the gentler ones to begin with.
Sure, so of course the pedal, this is primarily where we find the bass pipes of the organ. You normally are playing the bass part with your feet, and on a well-stocked organ like this with quite a big pedal division, we're lucky enough to find some solo sounds as well.
Okay.
But to start with, let's just hear a few of the big fundamental tones. So we've got 16 foot, which is an octave below piano pitch, and we also have 32 foot pipes here, which are 2 octaves below. So this is what that sounds like if I just stretch forward. True rumble.
Yeah, and so the pitch right down at the bottom is almost imperceptible, but underneath what's being played on by the hands on the manual parts, it creates this extraordinary texture from top to bottom, doesn't it? So as well as those gentle rumbles as you describe underneath, some of the stronger reed stops, which are also at those incredibly low pitches, sound even more extraordinary. So let's have a little listen to some of those.
So yes, we have 8 foot, 16 foot, and 32 foot reeds here. We also have a 4 foot, which again is Cavaillé-Coll original, and can be used as a solo sound. So here's the 4, 8 and 16 foot reeds to start with. And then if we add the 32 foot into that.
great. I mean, it's quite an overwhelming, magnificent sound, isn't it? So we can imagine that those sorts of pedal stops and those sorts of pedal sounds are going to be underpinning some pretty huge sounds that will be playing on the keyboard parts on the manual. So why don't we hear some of the manual reed stops that would sort of balance that, and tell us why some of these manual reeds are so special on this organ.
Sure, yes. So we have a wide variety of big chorus reeds on this organ. We have 3 pretty hefty reeds on the grate. We've had the swell reeds earlier, but we also have what's called a floating division, which means it's not connected to any manual by default, but you can assign it a manual as you please. And we've got some pretty hefty reeds here as well, including we've 2 harmonic reeds. And another one of the most characteristic French romantic stops, and a lot of Cavaillé and his contemporaries built organs with what are called chamade trumpets, and they are the horizontal trumpets that you see sticking out of the front of the organ case, and they can be, and usually are, devastatingly loud. And you can imagine that when you're adding that on top of the tutti, it is, as I said, pretty devastating.
Yeah, no one's going to struggle to hear those, are they? So now we've heard very specific areas of the organ in detail. Why don't you give us a demonstration just for a few seconds of the whole thing and what it sounds like when it's all going at full tilt, and I'll go away and take cover.